Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pestana. And we're here today with special guest, Tisha Morris, who's here to share with us her new book, Missing Element, Hidden Strength. Apply the natural strength of all 5 elements to unlock your full creative potential. Now, Tisha is an entertainment attorney and author who has been featured on ABC Live with Kelly and Ryan, Law and Crime Sidebar, Today.com, Elle Decor, ABC News, Well and Good, and many more. She holds a degree in law, economics, and interior design with certifications in yoga, feng shui, and coaching. Tisha advises and represents clients using her entrepreneurial experience, legal and publishing expertise, and practical wisdom to help clients realize their potential and strategize for optimum success. So let's welcome to the show, Tisha Morris.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always an honor and pleasure to be here with you.
Well, I'm delighted we get to have another conversation. It's been a little while, but my goodness, what a great book. What inspired you to write this?
Well, my background is as a feng shui practitioner. I also wear some other hats as a lawyer and so forth. But I got to a place where I wanted to bring out these aspects of feng shui into our personalities, into our how we go about our day and use our energy. And so it was a really fun exploration for myself, but also I think is extremely useful to help people, particularly solo entrepreneurs or those working kind of solo, have an understanding of how we can look to nature and borrow and use this template that nature gives us, which is the creative process. And so it's really a book for creatives and entrepreneurs and how you can create using the 5 elements of feng shui, which is also the 5 elements that come out of Taoism and Chinese medicine and these really ancient sciences, and really bringing them into our everyday life, whether it's writing a book or starting a new project, and how we can use these to facilitate that.
So I think it'd be good to just kind of start for the beginning. For a lot of people, they may not know what Taoism is. Can you share a little bit about that with us?
Absolutely. So Taoism, it's a philosophy. It dates back before longer than we have a date for. But it really is a philosophy that looks to nature and sees that everything is a micro of the macro. We each are our own little mini universe with the 5 elements being the makeup or the ingredients, so to speak. So we're all made up of the 5 elements, which are water, wood, fire, earth, and metal. And so is your living room, which that's where the feng shui comes in. So is every little aspect inside and outside of our homes and within our body, which is then that's where you start getting into acupuncture and more the medical side of things. So Taoism kind of, it went through a lot of evolutions, and it became political and then all these things, but it's oftentimes the I Ching is kind of the famed text that's used, and then it became a divination tool as well. But that's really the cornerstone of the 5 elements. And the 5 elements are, like I said, it's the creative process of, if you look out into your garden, it's how the plants are growing, with the sun being the fire and the dirt being the earth, the metal being the nutrients, the water being obviously the water. And if we break these 5 elements or 5 phases down, it actually makes up the creative process of anything that you're creating in your life. So it kind of is like kind of a manifestation template in a way.
So when we talk about creating, it's not just artwork or something along that lines. We're talking about business. It could be relationships, all that.
Exactly. Yeah. When I say the creative process, I mean basically turning ideas into things, turning your thoughts into things. Everything starts in the water phase, where that's the idea. Perhaps you get an idea for a book or for a podcast or whatever the case is. It kind of drops out of nowhere a lot of times, or maybe even our dream state or in a meditation. And that's the water phase. And then when we start to take action, on this idea, whether it's just kind of making an outline, jotting some notes down, we begin the wood phase. And then when we actually start kind of doing the elbow grease and actually start working on it, writing getting the 60,000 words out in your manuscript or whatever the case is, that's the fire phase. And then the earth phase, it asks you to kind of pause and start to think about how it's going to be received monetarily, think about the practicality of things, but there is a pause in the earth phase before you move into the editing phase, the metal phase. And it's there that you make the adjustments and fine tunement, the precision that you want for this project after you've gone through all the other stages. And so in my book, I kind of walk you through these phases in detail, and even have worksheets to where you can kind of get your idea out, and so that you can see how it fits into all these steps and stages.
I think that's so important. So when we talk about the missing element, in the title of your book, Hidden Strength, what does that really refer to?
Yeah, so there's whole nother layer of this, in that we look to ourselves and look to our own 5 elements balance. We all have all 5 elements within us, and it shows up in our personalities and how we run our energy is how I prefer to say that. And yet, so there's one, what I call your primary element, that we kind of lead with. It's kind of like our bread and butter. And then there's one of those elements that's kind of our Achilles heel. And it's the element that kind of trips us up unbeknownst to ourselves until now. It might be the I'm just not, these stories we start to form around our missing element. I'm just not good at writing, or I'm not a good speaker, or timing was just off on this project, or these kind of not excuses, but in hindsight they might seem that way, but it's really just our missing element. And once you kind of name it and claim it and start to embrace it, then it becomes your hidden strength. A lot of the quote that most inspired me for this book was the Joseph Campbell quote of "The cave you fear to enter holds your greatest treasure." And that cave is your missing element. And it's that place where every time we start a project, or actually just sometimes just starting the project is the missing element, or you get halfway through or 3/4 the way through, and then you either abandon ship or you just it gets really uncomfortable for some reason. And that's because you've rubbed up against that missing element. So in my book, I give really practical ways of starting to embrace and embody that missing element, so that it will not become such a albatross when it shows up in your work or in your life. It also even applies to relationships.
Well, it seems like having that information would just be so powerful for people. And, in your book, you talk about how the 5 element cycle is really the creative process, or one and the same.
Yes. You can also, what's beautiful about using these elements is collaboration. So I outline how these elements work together in the book. So, for example, 2 primary wood elements, or a fire element and a metal element, and kind of show you how they can work together. Some are kind of, a little more difficult relationships, and some are just, can really create gold through kind of an alchemy. But these, using collaborations and also teams to where we can kind of bring our primary element and our missing element together, and use partnerships to help integrate that missing element.
So how important is it for us to discover what our primary element is?
I'm a self-help junkie. I never pass up a quiz, right? And so it is very important, and also as is the missing element. So in my book, there's a quiz. There's also a quiz on my website, and you can see how you rank among all 5. And so that's what I love about the 5 elements, in that you are not just one element or one thing. You're not pigeonholed. You are all 5. And that really is the point, is that you are all of these energies, and you can call on each one of them as you need. I call it your inner board of directors. Calling on the water element is your inner guru. The wood element is your inner leader. The fire element is your inner motivator. The earth element is your inner stabilizer. And the metal element is your inner editor. And so you have this whole team there for you. And then again, like I said, you can look outside yourself if and when you want to. So, I never wanted to write a book where I pigeonhole someone instead into a category. Instead, you are all these things. And that really is the point.
So when we take the quiz and then we discover, oh, this element we really scored low on, how do we integrate that to becoming our greatest strength?
Great question. So for each of the elements in the book, I provide you with kind of 3 big categories of how to integrate this element. One is through our space, our everyday, our environment. That's where my background in feng shui comes into play. Particularly your space that, for me, it's my office, because that's where I am all day. It's also the space that I get to, do what I want to with, so to speak. For others, it may be, it may not be a whole room, or it could be your whole house if you live alone. It just depends on everyone's circumstance. But bringing in that element, your missing element, into your space. And so in feng shui, these elements show up in their literal form, but also in a symbolic form. For example, the fire element could be a candle, but it could also be the color red or the shape of a triangle. And so each of the elements have a color and a shape associated with them that you can bring into your space. I particularly like fire element tends to be one of my lower ones. And so when I'm really trying to crank out a manuscript, I'll burn a candle on my desk and just have that flame burning there. So your space definitely is a way to integrate. Also, I give lists of activities. So all kinds of activities, such as different types of yoga, taking a walk, journaling. All these activities are literal embodiments of these elements. So there's, I want to, it's like, my goal is not to make people's lives harder than they already are. And yet, there's something to be said about going outside of our comfort zone and maybe taking a pottery class that's maybe, instead of a spin class, for example, if that's a typical thing for fire elements. They love the high impact sports and like the real adrenaline rushing things, whereas the earth element is more of the pottery, cooking, planting in your garden, more of those things closer to the earth. And so a lot of times we gravitate toward those activities that are already kind of that mirror our primary element. When I would offer the invitation to go towards something that maybe is in your missing element. So that's a way. Also, your wardrobe, believe it or not. So your clothes. In fact, I can usually spot what someone's primary element is just by looking at what they're wearing that day. Now, of course, our moods and our even our element can change day to day, depending on if it's a rainy day, you might be more in an earth element mood, whereas a bright sunny day, you might be more fiery. But for the most part, people's wardrobes very much mirror their primary element. And so if you think about what you wear in a conscious way, for example, one of the best examples is, the power red tie of going to an interview. Well, that's the fire element. And that's the kind of energy you want to go into an interview, unless you're maybe interviewing for like a meditation teacher or something, in which case you might want to wear water element clothes. But for the most part, using I notice for myself on Mondays, I tend to wear black or like dark clothes because I'm kind of in an inward mood. But, that's not always the energy I need for my Mondays if I have a big, important meeting. So that's three ways: your environment, your activities, and your wardrobe. And like I said, I want to give really practical, everyday ways of starting to get to know your missing element, so that the more you play with it, taste it, the more it will not be this big hurdle when it comes to the big things in your life.
Now, it sounds like that's very much in a flow with the elements, while some of it could be, our primary element. That do those not move, or do they just depend on the day?
So yeah, when you take the quiz, I've had several people tell me that I had one person who's like, I took the quiz every day for 7 days to see how it would change. And I thought that was a really cool way to approach it. And that's more of a micro way of your like day-to-day moods. My intention was to kind of take the quiz as you kind of normally are in life. And for me, it's pretty static between wood and metal, depending on, well, I've gone through a lot of career changes, and honestly, depending on my career, my primary element has changed, even though both are very true to me. And that's not uncommon. A lot of times our primary element may be kind of a tie for two of them. Same with the missing element. It could be a tie there could be two that are tied, so to speak. And this isn't an exact science, and it can change. Our own life cycle follows the 5 element cycle, and that birth is the water or coming out of the womb is the water element. Those early years are the wood element, and then we move into adolescence, into our 20s and 30s, which is the fire element, and then things start to in midlife hit the earth element, and then as we get into our silver years, is the more metal element, no pun intended there. And so our own life cycle, and then in the macro follows the 5 elements, as does our day. We wake up in we sleep. In the water element, we wake up in the wood element. We get going on the fire element. We start to need that afternoon nap in the earth element. And then we start to wind down, dinner time in the metal element, and go back to sleep in the water element. And so our own life can also have these times of, for example, I've spent about 5 years in a place of grief, and that would be the water element. And so I was in a very watery place for many years. And so that's going to kind of skew my quiz, so to speak. So yeah, there's a lot of factors. And like I said, it's not an exact science. And a lot of times just reading the characterizations, so to speak, of each of these elements, you can pick out yourself. It's like, oh yeah, I'm definitely that, or I'm definitely not that. And a lot of times that's the easiest way to know what your primary element is and what your missing element is.
Well, I took your quiz and I found it very insightful. And I think a lot of people will feel the same way. When you created the quiz for this, was it something that you kind of did intuitively? How were you guided to do that?
So this is my second book on the 5 elements. In 2015, I had the book Decorating with the 5 Elements of Feng Shui. So I've been around the 5 elements for quite some time. There is and so the quiz, I've kind of fine-tuned this quiz from the quiz that was in the book, my book in 2015. And then the quiz in 2015 was inspired by there's a Chinese medicine book. I'm forgetting the name right now, but it's a really well-known Chinese medicine book that's kind of for acupuncture for the layperson in a way. And in that book, there's a pretty substantial quiz that a lot of feng shui practitioners use. And so I modeled the quiz using that as a bit of a guide. And then I have kind of tested the quiz with my students. I have a feng shui school where I've trained hundreds of students with feng shui, and so I've used them as my test guinea pigs as well. So it's been through some testing over time.
Well, I'm just knew it was very insightful taking that.
Thanks. I tried to make it as simple as possible and as short as possible, and yet as effective as possible.
You did a good job. You did a good job. Well, in your book, you talk about the dream team, creating our dream team. What is that, and how does that benefit us?
Yeah, so the dream team this is how you can really think about the 5 elements in terms of a team and team building. I use the literal metaphor of a basketball team to be the ideal 5 elements. So if you think about a basketball team, and I won't bore with basketball positions, but each of those 5 positions, the center, the guard, and all that, each of those represent how each of the 5 elements work. And so, not every team is made up of 5 people, but if it were, the ideal team would be having one person who each of these, each player, team member being their primary element, being one of the 5 elements. And so using that as a kind of a template. Now I also give examples and kind of the energetic quality of a team of 3 people and 4 people and 5 people, and how those different dynamics would play out in teams. So it's I think helpful for more corporate or small business or corporate settings where you are forming teams, and taking personalities into account, because this is where our primary element does come into play. Is usually when we show up in a collaboration or team, we want our best skills to come forward, and vice versa. And that's where where collaborations and teams can really, really take off. When you can bring your best skills to the table, and everyone's bringing their best skills to the table, and that's where the magic can really happen. So, personality quizzes have been used, have been and are being used in hiring people more than ever now, especially now that interviews are not being held in person as much, relying more on these personality tests, Myers-Briggs, and so forth. So this was another reason why I wrote the book when I did. This was a book I wrote during the pandemic, or during the our quarantine times. And I early on saw that the workplace would be changing forever, and more people would be working from home, whether you're employed or not employed, whether you work for yourself or employed. And so, it can be a solitary place. And not only that, but a place where you really have to know yourself, know your strengths, know your weaknesses, and really turn to your inner resources for guidance. And so that was why this book came at the time that it came.
Well, I'm so glad that it did. And so when I look at your book, and I think you talk about this as well, it really kind of integrates our creative, right brain with our business left brain, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what you're saying in Taoistic terms is yin and yang, and so yin is the feminine, the creative, that right brain, and the yang is the analytic, the masculine, the left brain, and of course it's the opposite in our sides of the body. Left side of our body is the feminine, the right brain, and vice versa, and so yin and yang energy are. Well, I always like to say if yin and yang were to have children, it would be the 5 elements, because each of the 5 elements have an aspect, or basically a spectrum of yin and yang energies. So anyway, just to kind of geek out a little bit on Taoism.
Well, and what thoughts do you want listeners and readers to take away from Missing Element Hidden Strength?
The Trojan horse for this book was really looking to nature for guidance. And even if it's just in a few paragraphs of the book, and understanding how amazing nature is and how using it as our guide and template, because the more we can honor, respect, look to, understand, co-create with earth and the five elements, and using nature as our guide, the more we can live in harmony with the earth, with ourselves, with others. And that really is the ultimate goal. Similar to, if you've ever, I'm sure everyone's potted a plant at some point or tried to grow something. And, you can get away with underwatering it, or you can get away with not having the right soil, and the plant's going to do okay. But this book is to help you thrive, not just survive. So it's for those who kind of have been kind of at a plateau in their work or their life, or not feeling fulfilled in some way, or not reaching the levels that they want to reach in their work or their career, and not sure why they're at this plateau. This is the book to help you go to that next level. And not just be the potted plant that kind of gets by, but that thrives with the right soil, the right sun, light, and the right watering. And it's that balance of the five elements, and bringing in your missing element that can help you do that.
Well, Tisha, where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community?
My website is my name, tishamorris.com. And from there, I have courses, and you can also link to buy the book. The book is available everywhere online that you buy books, of course, Amazon, bookshop.org. And I offer several courses. There's a writing course that uses the five elements as your guide to get you through the whole book, the point being to finish the book. I also have some other writing courses, and I still have you can also become a certified feng shui practitioner through my website as well. So tishamorris.com.
Well, Tisha, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Tisha. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Missing Element Hidden Strength. Again, if you'd like to connect with Tisha and learn more about her book and work, visit tishamorris.com. Missing Element Hidden Strength is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And if you don't see it on the shelf, ask for them to order, and of course, support our indie bookstores. Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick moment, and we'll be right back after this message. I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.